Maria Lightfoot stood in the dusty town square, her dark eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the wooden buildings. The desert wind whipped her long black hair across her face, but she didn't brush it away. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her swollen belly made it hard to stand straight. She was 6 months pregnant, alone, and about to be sold like cattle. The year was 1885, and the small town of Copper Ridge, Arizona, buzzed with activity. Men in worn cowboy hats and dusty boots gathered around the auction block, eyeing the goods for sale. Today was different, though. Today, they weren't just selling horses and farming equipment. They were selling people. Maria had been captured 3 weeks ago during a raid on her Apache village. The soldiers came at dawn, burning homes and taking prisoners. Her husband, Running Bear, had been away hunting with the other men. She never got to tell him about the baby growing inside her. Now, she might never see him again. Sheriff Bradley stood on the wooden platform, his badge catching the morning sunlight. He was a tall, thin man, with cold blue eyes and a mustache that drooped over his thin lips. Next to him stood 3 other Apache prisoners, all women, all scared. But Maria was the only one expecting a child. "Gentlemen," Sheriff Bradley called out, his voice carrying across the square. "We have here 4 Apache women, captured during last month's troubles. They're strong workers, good for cooking, cleaning, and other household duties. We'll start the bidding at $20 each." The crowd murmured and shifted. Some men looked uncomfortable, shuffling their feet and looking away. Others leaned forward, interested in the bargain. Maria felt sick, but not from her pregnancy. She couldn't believe this was happening in America, the land that claimed to value freedom. An older man with gray whiskers raised his hand. "I'll take the young one there." He pointed at Singing Bird, a girl barely 16. $25. "30, called another voice from the back. Maria watched in horror as her friend was sold like a horse. Singing Bird kept her eyes down, tears streaming down her cheeks. The winning bidder, a rough-looking man with tobacco-stained teeth, paid his money and led the girl away. Maria's heart broke for her young friend. Next came Little Dove, a woman in her 30s who had lost her own children in the raid. She went for $40 to a shopkeeper who needed help in his store. Then, it was Walking Woman's turn. She was older, maybe 50, with streaks of gray in her hair. A farmer bought her for $35, saying he needed help with his sick wife. Finally, it was Maria's turn. She stepped forward on shaking legs, her bound hands making it hard to balance. The crowd grew quiet when they saw her condition. Some men looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of buying a pregnant woman. Sheriff Bradley cleared his throat. "This here is Maria Lightfoot. She's young, healthy, and as you can see, she's expecting. The child will belong to whoever buys her. Of course, strong Apache stock. We'll start bidding at $20. Silence stretched across the square. Maria looked out at the faces staring back at her. Some showed pity, others disgust, and a few showed something worse. She lifted her chin higher, refusing to show fear even though her heart was racing. "Come on, gentlemen," the sheriff urged. "She's a good worker, and you'll get 2 for the price of 1 when that baby comes." Finally, a voice called out from near the back. $20. It was a thin, weaselly man with beady eyes and a crooked smile. Maria had seen him watching her with interest that made her skin crawl. "Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Do I hear 25? Silence again. Maria closed her eyes, trying not to think about what life with Mr. Perkins might be like. She had heard the other women in town whisper about him, about how he treated his workers, how several had run away despite the dangers of the desert. Just when Sheriff Bradley was about to bring down his hammer, another voice rang out, strong and clear. $100. The crowd gasped and turned to see who had made such an outrageous bid. Maria opened her eyes and saw a man pushing through the crowd. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and kind brown eyes. His dark hair was streaked with early gray, and he wore the clothes of a working rancher, Clean, but practical. Sheriff Bradley's eyebrows shot up. Did you say $100, Mr. Carson? I did. The man stepped closer to the platform. Maria could see a long scar running from his left ear, down to his collar, and his hands bore the calluses of hard work, but his eyes were gentle when they met hers. That's quite generous, sir. I'm sure. James Carson pulled out a leather pouch and began counting out gold coins. $100, as agreed. Mr. Perkins sputtered in anger. This ain't fair. I was the first bidder. Then you should have bid higher, Carson replied calmly, still counting coins. Last I checked, this was still an auction. The sheriff, clearly pleased with the unexpected windfall, smiled broadly. Sold to Mr. Carson for $100. He brought down his hammer with a loud bang. As Carson approached the platform to complete his purchase, Maria studied his face. She had heard of him. James Carson, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the territory. He employed many men and was known to be fair but tough. But why had he bought her? And why had he paid so much? Carson finished paying and climbed up on the platform. Maria tensed as he approached, unsure what to expect. To her surprise, he gently took her arm to help her down the steps. Easy now, he said softly. His touch was gentle, nothing like what she had expected. When they reached the ground, he pulled out a knife. Maria's eyes widened in fear, but he simply cut the ropes, binding her hands. She rubbed her wrists, trying to get the feeling back into her fingers. Thank you, she whispered in English, one of the few words she knew in the white man's language. Carson nodded. You're welcome. He looked around at the crowd, which was beginning to break up now that the excitement was over. Let's get you out of here. He led her to a wagon parked at the edge of the square. It was well built and clean, pulled by 2 strong horses. Carson helped her up onto the seat, being careful of her condition. Then he climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they drove through the town, Maria noticed people staring at them. Some looked curious, others disapproving. She heard a few whispered comments about Carson and his Indian woman. She kept her eyes straight ahead, trying to ignore the stares. They rode in silence for several miles before Carson finally spoke. My name is James, he said, speaking slowly and clearly. James Carson. You can call me James. Maria nodded but didn't respond. She wasn't sure how much English he expected her to understand, and she wasn't ready to trust him yet. For all she knew, he had bought her for the same reasons as Mr. Perkins, just with more money to spend. The landscape around them was beautiful, but harsh. Red rocks jutted up from the desert floor, and cacti dotted the rolling hills. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the bright blue sky. This was Apache country, land her people had roamed for generations before the white man came with his fences and his laws. After another hour of riding, they crested a hill, and Maria saw the Carson ranch spread out below them. It was larger than she had expected, with a big house, several barns, and corrals full of cattle and horses. Men moved around the property, tending to various chores. It looked prosperous and well organized. As they approached the house, Maria could see it was built in the Mexican style, with thick adobe walls and a red tile roof. A wide porch wrapped around the front, providing shade from the desert sun. It was a far cry from the traditional Apache wickiup she had grown up in, but it looked solid and welcoming. Carson pulled the wagon up in front of the house and climbed down. He walked around to help Maria down, again being gentle and patient with her condition. As they stood there, the front door opened, and a middle-aged Mexican woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. James, she called out in accented English. You are back early. I was not expecting. Her voice trailed off as she noticed Maria. Rosa, Carson said. This is Maria. She'll be staying with us. Can you prepare the spare room for her? Rosa's dark eyes took in Maria's condition and the situation immediately. Her expression softened with understanding and sympathy. Of course, James. Come, dear, she said to Maria in Spanish. Let me help you inside. Come. Maria was surprised to hear Spanish. She had learned some of the language from Mexican traders who visited her village. It was easier for her than English, and Rosa's kind tone made her feel slightly more at ease. Carson watched as Rosa gently led Maria toward the house. "Rosa," he called out, "see that she has everything she needs. Clothes, food, whatever will make her comfortable." "Yes, James. I will take good care of her." As they entered the house, Maria was struck by its cleanliness and comfort. The floors were polished wood, covered here and there with colorful rugs. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything had a place. It reminded her somehow of her grandmother's wickiup, where everything was organized and purposeful. Rosa led her down a hallway to a small but pleasant room. It had a real bed with clean white sheets, a wooden dresser, and a chair by the window. Sunlight streamed through white curtains, making the room feel warm and welcoming. "This will be your room," Rosa said in Spanish. "Are you hungry? When did you last eat?" Maria realized she was indeed hungry. She had barely eaten anything in the past 3 days, and the baby inside her seemed to be demanding nourishment. "Yesterday morning," she admitted. Rosa clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "That is no good for you or the little one. Come, let me fix you something." She led Maria to the kitchen, a large, comfortable room with a big stove and a long wooden table. Rosa bustled around, heating up leftover stew and cutting fresh bread. The smell made Maria's stomach growl loudly. "Sit, sit," Rosa insisted, pulling out a chair. "You must eat properly now. When is the baby coming?" 3 months, maybe a little more," Maria replied, accepting the bowl of stew gratefully. It was delicious, full of meat and vegetables, and seasoned with herbs she didn't recognize. Rosa nodded knowingly. "Your first child?" Maria's throat tightened. She thought of Running Bear, of the life they had planned together, of the joy on his face when she had finally planned to tell him about the baby. "Yes," she whispered. Rosa must have heard the sadness in her voice. 3 weeks had passed since Maria arrived at the Carson ranch, and she still felt like a bird in a cage, even though the cage was comfortable. Each morning, she woke in the soft bed Rosa had prepared for her, ate breakfast in the warm kitchen, and then spent her days learning the strange rhythms of ranch life. James Carson puzzled her most of all. He had bought her at auction, paid a fortune for her, but he barely spoke to her. When he did, it was always polite, always respectful. He asked about her health, if she needed anything, if Rosa was taking good care of her, but he never demanded anything from her, never treated her like property he had purchased. Rosa became her closest companion during those early weeks. The older Mexican woman had worked for James for 15 years, ever since his wife had died in childbirth. She told Maria this story one afternoon as they sat on the front porch, shelling beans for dinner. "Elena was so young, so full of life," Rosa said, her voice soft with memory. "She wanted children so badly. When she finally got pregnant, James was the happiest man in Arizona territory. But something went wrong during the birth. We lost them both, Elena and the baby." Maria's hand moved instinctively to her own swollen belly. "How long ago?" 7 years now. James hasn't been the same since. He works too hard, sleeps too little. He's become a ghost of the man he used to be." Rosa looked at Maria thoughtfully. "Until now. Since you arrived, I see something different in his eyes. Not happiness exactly, but hope maybe." That evening, as Maria helped Rosa prepare dinner, James came in from the range earlier than usual. His clothes were dusty and his boots worn, but he had washed his face and hands before entering the house. He always did that, Maria had noticed. He was a man who respected cleanliness and order. "Smells good in here," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Rosa made your favorite," Maria replied in her careful English. She had been practicing with Rosa every day, and her vocabulary was growing. James looked surprised to hear her speak English so clearly. A small smile crossed his weathered face. You're learning fast. One, 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 one. Rosa is good teacher. Maria stirred the pot of chili. Rosa had started. She patient with me. Patient. James corrected gently. She is patient with me. She is patient with me. Maria repeated, filing away the grammar lesson. During dinner, James surprised her by asking about her life before the ranch. He had never shown interest in her past before, seeming to respect her privacy. But tonight was different. Rosa tells me you know about healing plants, he said between bites of cornbread. Is that true? Maria nodded. My grandmother taught me. Many Apache women learn these things. One of my men hurt his hand yesterday. Cut it pretty bad on some wire. It's not healing well. Would you mind taking a look at it? Maria was surprised by the request. She had expected many things from James Carson. But not this. Not asking for her help. Her knowledge. I look at it tomorrow? That would be very helpful. Thank you. The next morning, Rosa led Maria to the bunkhouse where the cowboys lived. The injured man was Tom Peterson, a young cowboy not much older than Maria herself. His hand was wrapped in dirty bandages, and Maria could smell the infection even before she unwrapped it. This is very bad, she told Rosa in Spanish, then switched to English for Tom's benefit. Hand is sick. Infection. Tom's face paled. Does that mean they'll have to cut it off? Doc Wilson, in town, said that might happen if it didn't get better. Maria studied the wound carefully. It was deep and angry looking, but she had seen worse. Her grandmother had taught her that the white man's medicine sometimes jumped too quickly to cutting things off instead of healing them. No cutting, she said firmly. I can help, but you must do exactly what I say. She spent the morning gathering plants from around the ranch. Some grew wild in the desert. Others Rosa had cultivated in her garden for cooking. Maria ground them into a paste using techniques her grandmother had taught her, mixing them with clean water and a little honey Rosa provided. When she returned to treat Tom's hand, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread quickly that the Apache woman was going to try to heal Peterson's infection. Some of the cowboys looked skeptical, others curious. Maria ignored their stares and focused on her patient. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, ignoring Tom's winces of pain, then applied her herbal paste. Finally, she wrapped his hand in clean bandages Rosa had provided. Change this every day, she instructed. Keep clean. No dirt. No work with this hand for 1 week. A week? Tom protested. Before Maria could respond, James Carson's voice cut through the morning air. You'll get your wages, Peterson. Do what she says. Maria turned to see James approaching the group. She hadn't heard him come up behind them. His expression was serious, but approving, as he looked at her handiwork. How did you know? He asked her quietly. Know what? That I would pay his wages. That I wouldn't make him work with an injured hand. Maria looked into his eyes, trying to understand this complicated man who had bought her, but treated her with such unexpected respect. You are not cruel, man, she said simply. I see this. Something shifted in James's expression at her words. For a moment, his carefully controlled facade cracked, and she saw something vulnerable underneath. Pain, perhaps. Loneliness, certainly. Thank you, he said softly, for helping Tom. Over the following days, Tom's hand healed remarkably well. The infection cleared up, and the wound began to close cleanly. Word spread beyond the ranch about Maria's healing abilities. Neighbors began stopping by, asking if she would look at various ailments. A child with a persistent cough, an older woman with aching joints, a man with a rash that wouldn't clear up. James never objected to these visits. In fact, he seemed pleased that Maria was finding a purpose, a way to contribute to the community. He even built her a small room off the kitchen, where she could store her herbs and meet with patients. One afternoon, As Maria was treating a rancher's wife for headaches, James approached her after the woman had left. "I've been thinking," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Maria had learned this was a sign that he was nervous about something. "About your situation here." And Maria's heart clenched. Was he going to send her away? Sell her to someone else? Her hand moved protectively to her belly, where the baby was becoming more active each day. "People in town are talking," James continued. "About us. About why I bought you. What you're doing here." "What do they say?" Maria asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Some think. Others think I'm just using you for free labor." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Maria had come to associate with his frustration. "Neither is true, but the talk bothers me. Not for my sake, but for yours." Maria waited, unsure what he was getting at. "I think we should make your position here official. Legal." James pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. "I've had some documents drawn up, papers that would make you a free woman, employed by me as a healer and household assistant, with wages of your own." Flo. Maria stared at the papers, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Free? Free. You could leave any time you wanted to, go anywhere you chose. But I hope—" He paused, looking almost shy. "I hope you might choose to stay." Tears filled Maria's eyes. In all her darkest moments since the raid on her village, she had never dared to hope for something like this. Freedom. Choice. The chance to make her own decisions about her life and her child's future. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do this for me?" James was quiet for a long moment, looking out toward the mountains in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything that matters to you," he said. "I know what it's like to feel helpless, to have no control over your own life. I bought you to save you from Perkins, but I never intended to keep you as property. You're a person, Maria. You deserve the right to choose your own path." Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What about baby? When baby comes, the baby will be free too. Born free, with your last name. No one will ever be able to claim ownership of either of you again." The legal documents were simple but thorough. Rosa helped Maria understand each section, translating the more complex legal language into Spanish when necessary. The papers declared Maria Lightfoot a free woman, employed by the Carson Ranch, at a salary of $20 per month, plus room and board. It was more money than most cowboys made, and far more than Maria had ever dreamed of having. But the most important part was a clause that guaranteed her freedom to leave at any time, with no obligations or debts, and another that declared any children she might have would be born free, with full rights of citizenship. James had thought of everything. That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the desert mountains purple and gold, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced since before the raid on her village. "Peace, James," she said quietly. "Thank you. For everything." He nodded, not taking his eyes off the sunset. "You don't need to thank me, Maria. We all deserve to be free." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Maria placed her hand on her belly and felt her child stirring within her. For the first time since her capture, she felt hope about the future. Her baby would be born free, in a place where they were wanted and valued. She still missed Running Bear desperately, still wondered if he was alive and searching for her. But she was beginning to understand that sometimes life takes you down paths you never expected. And sometimes those paths lead to something better than you could have imagined. The desert night was cool and clear, full of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients to heal, new English words to learn. But tonight, Maria Lightfoot sat on her own front porch, a free woman with money in her pocket and hope in her heart. In the distance, coyotes howled their ancient song to the moon, and Maria smiled. She understood their language. It was the language of survivors, of creatures who adapted and endured no matter what life threw at them. She was Apache. She was a survivor. And now, finally, she was free. Because she reached over and patted Maria's hand gently. Things will be all right, dear. James is a good man. He will not hurt you. Maria wanted to believe her. But trust didn't come easily anymore. Too much had happened. Too much had been taken from her. She ate her stew in silence, wondering what this rancher really wanted from her, and what would happen when her baby was born. Outside, she could hear the sounds of ranch life continuing. Men calling to each other. Horses neighing. Cattle lowing in the distance. It was a different world from the one she had known. But perhaps, somehow, she would find a way to survive in it. She had to. For her child's sake, if nothing else. As she finished eating, Maria wondered if Running Bear was looking for her, if he even knew what had happened to their village. She wondered if she would ever see him again, or if this ranch would become her permanent prison. Only time would tell what James Carson really intended for her and her unborn child. The autumn winds were just beginning to cool the desert air when Maria's contractions started. It was early October, and she had been living freely at the Carson Ranch for 2 months. The legal papers James had given her were framed and hanging in her room, a daily reminder that she was no longer anyone's property. Rosa found her in the herb garden at dawn, bent over a row of sage plants, breathing hard through a particularly strong pain. The older woman immediately took charge, having delivered many babies in her village back in Mexico. "Come, dear one," Rosa said gently, taking Maria's arm. "It is time to go inside." James was in the kitchen drinking his morning coffee when Rosa helped Maria through the back door. He took one look at Maria's flushed face and pained expression and set down his cup. "Is it?" he began. "Yes," Rosa confirmed. "The baby is coming. We need to prepare the room and get the doctor." "I'll ride to town for Doc Wilson right now," James said, already reaching for his hat. Maria caught his sleeve as he passed. "No, doctor," she said firmly. "Rosa can help me. Apache women have babies without doctors for thousands of years." James looked uncertain. "But what if something goes wrong? What if you need help?" "Then Rosa will help. She has delivered many babies. Please, James. I want to do this the way my mother did, the way my grandmother did." James looked at Rosa, who nodded confidently. "I delivered my own 6 children and helped with many others. I can do this." Another contraction hit Maria then, stronger than before, and she gripped the kitchen table to stay upright. When it passed, she looked up to find James watching her with concern and something else. Something that looked like the same protective instinct she had seen when he defended her at the auction. "All right," he said quietly. "But I'm staying close by. If Rosa needs anything at all, you call for me." The labor lasted through the day and into the evening. Rosa stayed with Maria constantly, timing the contractions, helping her walk when she could, holding her hands when the pain became overwhelming. James paced the kitchen and the front porch, occasionally bringing Rosa whatever she requested. Clean towels, hot water, herbal teas. Maria had prepared weeks earlier for this moment. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maria felt the final urge to push. Rosa positioned herself at the foot of the bed, her experienced hands ready to catch the new life that was about to enter the world. "I see the head," Rosa exclaimed. "One more push. Dear one. Your baby is almost here." With a strength born of determination and hope, Maria pushed with everything she had. A moment later, the room filled with the sound of a baby's first cry, strong, healthy, and indignant at being thrust into the cold world. "A son," Rosa announced, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "A beautiful, perfect son." Maria collapsed against her pillows, exhausted but triumphant. Rosa cleaned the baby quickly and wrapped him in a soft blanket Maria had sewn from fabric. James had brought her from town. When she placed the tiny bundle in Maria's arms, the new mother felt her heart expand in ways she had never imagined possible. The baby had her dark hair and olive skin, but his eyes, when they briefly opened, were a warm brown that reminded her of autumn leaves. He was small but perfectly formed, with tiny fingers that immediately curled around Maria's thumb when she offered it to him. "What will you call him?" Rosa asked softly. Maria had thought about this for months. She wanted a name that would honor both sides of her son's heritage, the Apache blood that ran through her veins, and the American world he would grow up in. "Joseph," she said finally. "Joseph Running Bear Lightfoot." Rosa smiled. "That is a strong name for a strong boy." A soft knock at the door interrupted their quiet moment. "Rosa?" came James's voice from the hallway. "Is everything all right?" "I heard the baby cry." "Come in, James," Rosa called. "Come, meet the newest member of our family." James entered the room hesitantly, his hat in his hands and his expression uncertain. When his eyes fell on Maria holding her son, something profound shifted in his face. The careful control he usually maintained cracked completely, revealing wonder, tenderness, and a vulnerability that took Maria's breath away. "He's beautiful, Maria," James whispered, approaching the bed slowly. "Absolutely beautiful. Would you like to hold him?" Maria asked, surprising herself with the offer. James looked startled. Are you sure? I don't want to hurt him." "You won't hurt him. Here." Maria carefully transferred the baby to James's strong arms, showing him how to support the tiny head. James held little Joseph with infinite care, as if he were made of spun glass. The baby stirred in his arms and opened his eyes, seeming to study the face looking down at him with such wonder. "Hello there, little man," James murmured. "Welcome to the world." For several minutes, they stayed like that. Maria watching James hold her son, Rosa tidying up around them, and the baby sleeping peacefully in the arms of the man who had given them both their freedom. Winter came early that year, bringing snow to the mountains and cold winds to the desert valley. Maria recovered quickly from Joseph's birth and threw herself into caring for her son and continuing her work as a healer. The baby was healthy and strong, growing rapidly on his mother's milk and the love that surrounded him from all sides. James had surprised everyone by how naturally he took to having a baby in the house. He would often be found in the evenings sitting in the kitchen with Joseph on his lap, talking to the child about ranch business or reading aloud from newspapers. The sight of the strong, weathered rancher cradling the tiny infant became as natural as sunrise to everyone who lived there. One evening in December, as snow began to fall outside the warm kitchen windows, Maria was nursing Joseph when James approached her with something in his hands. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "For both of you." He placed a small wooden box in her free hand. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate designs that reminded Maria of both Apache patterns and Mexican silver work. "James, it's beautiful," she breathed. "But I cannot accept this." "Open it," he said simply. Maria pressed the tiny clasp, and the locket sprang open. Inside was a miniature photograph, not of her or Joseph, as she had expected, but of a young Apache man with kind eyes and traditional dress. Her heart stopped. "Running Bear," she whispered. "I hired a detective," James explained quietly, "to find out what happened to your husband, to your village. It took months, but we finally located him." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Is he? He's alive. He's been searching for you ever since the raid." The detective gave him this photograph and told him where you were, that you were safe and free. James paused, his voice becoming rougher. "He's coming here, Maria. He should arrive sometime in the next few days." The locket fell from Maria's suddenly nerveless fingers. James caught it before it could hit the floor and placed it gently on the table beside her chair. "You found him," she said wonderingly. I thought you deserved to know the truth. To have the choice of what to do with that knowledge." Maria looked up at James, trying to understand the man who continued to surprise her with his generosity and selflessness. "This must have cost you a great deal of money. Money well spent." he replied quietly. 3 days later, Maria was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when Rosa called out from the kitchen door. "Maria, come quickly. There is a rider approaching." Maria's heart began to race as she recognized the figure on horseback coming down the ranch road. Even after all these months, even at a distance, she knew that proud posture, that way of sitting on a horse as if he and the animal were one being, Running Bear. She ran toward him, her skirts flying, her heart pounding with joy and anticipation. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and caught her in his arms, spinning her around as he had done so many times in their happy days together. "My heart," he whispered in Apache, holding her tight against him. "I thought I had lost you forever." "I am here," she whispered back. "I am safe. We are both safe." It was only then that Running Bear noticed her changed figure, the evidence that she was no longer the same woman he had lost 9 months ago. "The baby?" he asked quietly. "A son. Joseph. He is beautiful, and healthy, and perfect." Running Bear's eyes filled with tears of joy. A son. After all this time, after all this pain, we have a son. Maria took his hand and led him toward the house, where James was standing on the front porch with Joseph in his arms. The two men studied each other carefully. The Apache warrior, who had lost everything and searched tirelessly for his family, and the white rancher, who had protected that family and given them freedom. James stepped forward and carefully placed Joseph in his father's arms. Running Bear looked down at his son with wonder and overwhelming love, speaking soft words in Apache that made the baby's eyes flutter open. "Thank you," Running Bear said to James in careful English, "for protecting them, for giving them freedom." James nodded. "They earned their place here. But now, you have a choice to make, all of you, about what comes next." That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table sharing Rosa's hearty stew, the conversation turned to the future. Running Bear had found work on a ranch 2 territories over, saving every penny to continue his search for Maria. Now that he had found her, he wanted to take his family and start fresh somewhere new. "There are Apache communities in New Mexico territory," he explained. "Places where we could live among our own people again, where Joseph could learn the old ways." Maria listened to her husband's plans with a conflicted heart. Part of her longed to return to the traditional life she had known, to raise her son among their people. But another part of her had grown to love this place, these people who had become her chosen family. "What do you want, Maria?" James asked quietly. "What would make you happiest?" Before she could answer, Rosa spoke up from where she was washing dishes at the sink. "Why must it be one or the other?" she asked practically. "James, your ranch is large enough for 2 families, is it not? And Running Bear, you are a skilled horseman and tracker, yes? James always needs good men who understand the land." James looked thoughtful. "Rosa's right. If you wanted to stay, I could use a man with your skills. The pay is fair, and there's plenty of room to build a house of your own." Running Bear and Maria exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them in the way of couples who know each other's thoughts. "We would want to teach Joseph the Apache ways," Running Bear said carefully. "Our language, our traditions." "Of course," James agreed. "This is your son. You should raise him as you see fit." "And Maria would continue her work as a healer?" Running Bear asked. "If she wanted to. People come from miles around for her help now. She's built something important here." Maria felt tears of gratitude prick her eyes. After months of believing she would have to choose between the different parts of her identity, here was a man offering her the chance to embrace them all. Spring came to the Carson Ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. Running Bear had proven to be everything James had hoped for in a ranch hand. Skilled, reliable, and possessed of an almost mystical understanding of horses and cattle. He and James had developed a mutual respect that had grown into genuine friendship. Maria continued her work as a healer, now with Running Bear's traditional Apache knowledge complementing what her grandmother had taught her. Their combination of old wisdom and new techniques brought people from even further away seeking their help. Joseph thrived in this unique environment, surrounded by love from multiple cultures. He babbled happily in Apache when his parents spoke to him in their native tongue, and gurgled contentedly when Rosa sang him Spanish lullabies. James had become like a beloved uncle to the child, often found reading to him from books about distant places and great adventures. One evening in late spring, as Maria sat on the front porch watching Joseph take his first wobbly steps between his father and James, she reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. The auction block in Copper Ridge seemed like a lifetime ago, a nightmare from which she had awakened to find herself living a dream she could never have imagined. Running Bear caught Joseph as the baby fell forward with a giggle, then looked over at Maria with the smile that had first won her heart years ago. "Are you happy, my heart?" he asked in Apache. Maria looked around at the life they had built. Running Bear, teaching their son to track rabbits in the garden, Rosa humming as she prepared dinner, James coming up the road from a day spent working with the cattle that provided for all of them. It was not the life she had planned, but it was rich and full and free. "Yes," she said simply, "I am happy." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Maria Lightfoot held her son close and listened to the desert wind singing its ancient song of endurance and adaptation. She was Apache. She was free. She was home. And in this place, where different worlds had come together to create something entirely new, she had found not just survival, but joy.